Let us continue. Mr. Edgeworth, the committee has been in contact with me. They would like to inform you that you are under intense scrutiny. And personally, I'm uneasy about letting you decide the court's next action.
In that case, Your Honor, I have an eloquent solution. Let the defense call the next witness.
I see no problem in that. You have a witness in mind?
I do, Your Honor. The defense calls Damon Gant to the stand.
But the Chief has no connection to this incident.
I have evidence, Your Honor, which says otherwise. Evidence of a rather personal nature, and I'd rather that the Chief be here when I present it.
Very well. Bailiff, contact the Chief of Police. Tell him that his presence is requested in the courtroom.
Will the witness please state their name and occupation?
You must be joking.
You're right. You are known to all of us. There's no need for formalities.
You're treading on thin ice, Worthy. I advise you not to take another step.
Chief Gant, we've summoned you here to testify about the night Neil Marshall died.
I thought we'd already covered that, right so? He was tragically killed by Miss Emma Skye. And Lana forged evidence to cover it up.
It does look that way. But what interests me is that your involvement in this has always been mysteriously overlooked. You were there that night, weren't you?
You really are naive. Fine, ask away, but don't blame me when this turns out to be a waste of time.
Tell us about your activity that night.
Let me see now. I was with Marshall when he interrogated Dark. The interview came to an abrupt end when Dark decided to make a run for it. Marshall immediately gave chase, while I used the phone to alert the rest of the building of the situation. Then I set out in search of Dark myself. When I reached my office, Lana must have already set the scene as it were. I played no part in her illegal activities.
Hold it! If that's true, how did the list of missing evidence end up in your safe?
I beg your pardon?
This is the second half of the SL9 evidence list, which disappeared before it was ever submitted. I found this in the safe in your office. Care to explain?
David, what's the meaning of this? I should think that is obvious, Hudgie. Mr. Wright is lying. My safe has never been home to any such items. That forgery went on behind my back. I had no reason to get involved. It would not benefit me in the slightest.
Objection! Quite the reverse, in fact, Mr. Gant. If you'd succeeded, then there would have been huge benefits to you.
Such as?
By helping Lana Skye protect her sister, you held over her the power of ultimatum. You knew of Emma's guilt, and you knew that Lana would do anything to keep it a secret. In other words, from that day on, you had complete control over her.
You don't mean blackmail?
Quite so, Your Honor. Lana Skye was elevated to the position of Chief Prosecutor shortly after the Joe Dark incident, thanks in no small part to Deputy Police Chief Gant. With her in place and his own promotion to Chief assured, he would be in total control of the law.
That's quite an imagination you both have, but you've yet to present any proof. This is preposterous! You cannot accuse the Chief of Police of blackmail without evidence!
Our evidence comes from Lana's actions throughout this trial. She insists that she committed the crime, but shows no remorse for it, hardly the tells of a guilty conscience. We believe that she may be taking the fall on Mr. Gant's instructions in order to cover up his involvement in this.
Mr. Wright, you're not suggesting...
Damon Gant, I'm accusing you of the murder of Bruce Goodman.
You've got quite a nerve, Righto. You can't be serious.
Your Honor, we've accounted for all but one of the people who entered the evidence room on the day Goodman died. Mr. Gant, would you mind telling us your ID number?
Mr. Wright, my ID number is the key to a great many confidential police files. You can't expect me to give that number out.
Fair enough. That would be unfair. Shall I say it instead?
What do you mean?
When I investigated the Chief's office, it occurred to me that the combination on his safe is the same length as a police ID number, and that a code is easiest to remember when it's significant to the person. I think you know where I'm going with this, because you know I opened your safe. If your ID number is not the one at the top of this list, then why does your safe open with a combination of 7 sevens?
Alright, so that's my ID number. What of it?
So you admit you entered the evidence room that day? I'm the chief of police. I can go wherever I like. Then perhaps you can answer this. Was anyone with you when you went there? There's no point in denying it. Goodman had to get into the evidence room that day. But he lost his ID card, so he filled in a lost item report, taking it to you.
Upon giving it to you, he must have asked you to accompany him to the room so he could empty his locker.
I don't know what transpired between the two of you that day, but when you were alone in the evidence room, you killed him in cold blood.
And then you had the body moved to the prosecutor's office, where Lana was waiting, ready to stage a second murder to protect you from any repercussions.
And how, pray tell, did I move the body to the prosecutor's office?
You're the chief of police. You're as resourceful as they come.
So you think I could hand the body to an officer and have him run an errand with it?
No. This was difficult, even for you, but you still managed it. Rather ingeniously, I must say.
All you needed was this.
A screwdriver?
Precisely. You needed to get the body to Miss Skye at the prosecutor's office, but you couldn't risk that yourself. But there was a way for you to get someone else to take it there without them knowing.
But who?
You called me that day, Chief Kent, asking me to take evidence back to the prosecutor's office, but your real reason was to get me there after the award ceremony. In the meantime, you'd stored Goodman's body in the boot of my car, ready for me to unwittingly deliver it to Lana Skye.
When Angel Starr saw Lana stab Goodman next to the open boot of Mr. Edgeworth's car, she assumed that Lana intended to stow the body in there, but in fact, the reverse was true. Lana was removing the body from the boot so that she could carry out her instructions and stage a second murder to allow Mr. Gant to go free. Isn't that right? Say something!
No.
What?
As Chief of Police, I am initiating my right to refuse to testify. But Damon, that right is not to be so casually invoked. You do realise that if you do this, you will no longer be able to testify in this courtroom.
I couldn't care less, Udgy.
I've important business to attend to, and unless either of you has a shred of evidence to back these claims up, I bid you good day. I think that's a no. Udgy, I'll see you later for lunch. Very well. Goodbye, Damon. Mr. Wright, I'm surprised you would bring such a serious allegation against the Chief of Police without evidence.
But that aside, I can't see how you intend to continue this trial.
With another witness, Your Honour.
But there are no more witnesses.
There's one person whose testimony is yet to be heard, and she's the most important witness of all.